Welcome to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, a window into the soul of the North Fork of Long Island. We'll delve into the pulse of our community, its pressing issues, promising opportunities, and the rich stories that weave our shared history. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 112, we sit down with Nicole Salgado, a secondary ENL teacher and multicultural club advisor at Greenport High School. Nicole shares her personal journey growing up bilingual in the U.S., how those experiences shaped her path as an educator, and what it's like supporting multilingual learners here on the North Fork. We talk about language, culture, the joys and challenges of teaching, and the importance of building strong, lasting connections with students and their families. Nicole reflects on what she loves most about being in the classroom, from witnessing students' growth to creating a space where all voices are heard, and the hurdles that come with navigating a diverse and evolving educational landscape. And as we look ahead, she shares her hopes for the future of the North Fork community as a whole. So I hope you enjoy episode 112 with Nicole Salgado. This episode was recorded March 20th, 2025. Thank you so much for coming on to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today. I look forward to talking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So with many of the guests that we've had on, I usually like to start off with a question in the beginning. If you could share a little bit about your family history and then growing up bilingual in the U.S.
Sure. So I'll start with, I was born here, but my family background is from Ecuadorian descent. So both my parents are born in Ecuador and came here, but had me here. So I was born here. But because my parents were both Ecuadorian and older when they got to the United States, I grew up speaking Spanish. Spanish was my first language, and I grew up with Ecuadorian, cultural background and traditions, and in an Ecuadorian household, I should say. So because of that, I was an ENL student when I was super young. I did test out by like second grade, but I did go through the notions of being an ENL student. Where I grew up was predominantly white. So that was another experience growing up with my background, but also with my surroundings were evident in how different, contrasting culturally. So yeah, like I said, I tested out pretty early out. So by later elementary, I was bilingual and more accustomed to the culture here. So let me actually go back a little bit. I'm going to actually talk about my ENL teacher, because she's going to be a big thing about what I'm going to talk about and where I'm at now. She was a big part of why I'm a teacher now. I am an ENL teacher now. So my experience with my ENL teacher specifically was great. And I do want to add that she was not bilingual. She only spoke English. And we could talk about that a little bit more later and, what it is to be an ENL teacher. But I think it's just she was like a stepping stone in what my career is now. Even though it was I was like first grade, kindergarten, but she had that much of an impact on me. So fast forward, I graduated in 2010. I was always pretty in tune with my culture, despite being in the community that I was. I do have a pretty big family. I think that was probably a big factor. I was very close with my cousins who were also in a similar situation as me. So when I graduated, I went for my bachelor's in Spanish language and literature with a communications minor, thinking that I would be like an interpreter, translator, something in that world. And I did my 4 years and I got that degree. I tried that a little bit after I graduated, work-wise, and I realized that my passion was just not there. It was just not, my thing, I guess. So I had to just kind of reconsider and reevaluate my life, because I'm like, man, I just did 4 years of something I thought I was going to love, and I don't love it. And I saw that very quickly. So I took like a 2-year break, and I did some traveling, and yeah, kind of just like rediscovering who I was and where I wanted to go. Personally and career wise. And then I kind of did like this, like digging, and was like, you know what? With my experiences in my background and my positive relationship with my ENL teacher, why not maybe look into teaching? And then when I did a little bit more research, I'm like, you know what? An ENL teacher, that sounds like something I could really find a passion for. So that's what I did. I went for my master's, my 2 years in my master's program as an ENL. That's how I got my teaching cert, and got a job right after. And now I'm an ENL teacher. I'm actually still in school. I went back again because I'm getting my certification to be an administrator.
Okay.
So that's where I'm at now. That's today.
But then I had one question, if like just going back a bit, in terms of your parents coming over here, what attracted them to the area? Where in Long Island, and the connection?
I think the commonality was probably family for both. Both my parents had family here. I should also make it clear that they knew each other in Ecuador, but they actually started having a relationship here. Which is funny, because like you would think they knew each other, like family friends from Ecuador, but it happened here. But they were both because of family reasons. My mom, she's one of 5 siblings, and she's the middle one, so her older siblings came here, and like it was just kind of like a thing, like they were just all coming here, and then they ended up in Brooklyn. And then my dad, same thing, like his family started coming here. And he ended up in Queens first, and he actually joined the Navy right after. So that was really the reason. Separate reasons, but kind of similar in a sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then also, even in terms of your time in school, how was your overall experience through middle school or high school? And did you have any favorite classes during that time?
Yeah. So when I was choosing to follow like a language class in middle school, a lot of my friends were like, oh, you speak Spanish. Like Spanish class is a no-brainer. You would get hundreds and stuff, But I'm like, that's not really what I want to do. Like, why not take the opportunity to learn a third language then? So I ended up taking Italian, and I loved it. That was like my favorite class from like 7th grade all the way to actually college. I kept taking classes of Italian in college. So that was my favorite. Just learning another language. I also took up American Sign Language. So languages have always been my interest.
Yes. And was that something, even as a child, was that something that your parents were passionate about, making sure you knew even Spanish growing up?
Yeah, I tell my parents that the greatest gift they ever gave me was the Spanish language. And I don't know if they purposely like, oh, let's teach her Spanish and then she'll be bilingual. I think it was just out of the situation, right? Like they really only spoke Spanish when I was born. And I like to say we kind of learned English together, because my mom would take like classes here and there at Suffolk, for English. And my dad, he, like I said before, he did go to the Navy, but he didn't become super proficient in the Navy. He also took a couple classes. And then by then I was like in preschool and kinder. So I was almost like learning English with my parents. But now in hindsight, they do say like, that was fantastic. That's great that we were able to do that for you.
And then, so you mentioned going for your master's degree and for teaching, and then how was that coming out of school and then applying for jobs in the area? Were you interested in staying on Long Island at that point?
Yeah, so I don't know if I can say like, oh, I wanted to stay on Long Island, but I think maybe I probably was like, let me start here and see what happens, like, let's see what I can get. And like what even school districts will give me the opportunity to even interview. Like as a new teacher, that's kind of where your headspace is at those moments. Cause you want to get out there and even like just interviewing wherever, like that's still practice. So like, I was just like, let me just try and see what was going on there. But I did get a job luckily I got a job pretty quickly. I had one of my first interviews were at Riverhead, and that's where I started. I did a year at Riverhead High School before coming to my current job, Greenport.
And I was curious, as a child or growing up, were you more central Long Island area? Yeah. But would you ever come out to the South Fork or North Fork as a child for vacation?
To like visit?
To visit as a vacation, or would you go more into New York City? Or...
Yeah, we would go more west. I feel like, honestly, so my first time coming out east, actually, let me think about it. I think, if anything, we were going more to the South Fork. I didn't really know much about the North Fork, when I was a teenager or younger, because I think the word Hamptons is like that's like the main thing that you think of when, at least at that time, like when you think of like the East End.
Yes.
At least with my parents, they would think, oh, like the Hamptons. But my first time coming out to the North Fork was much later. I was probably in my like early 20s before I got my teaching job. That was my first time coming out here. Okay. And I went to actually the Strawberry Festival. Okay. And that was my first encounter with the North Fork.
And what about when you first came out to more going east to Greenport? What did you think of the area?
It was it's super different from what I was accustomed to. I was going to say was, because now at this point it's like part of my life, right? Yes. But yeah, it was super different, but I didn't see it as like I liked it. I liked that it was different. I always have, and I still do. When I tell people I commute almost an hour to work, they're like, gasp, like, what? No, that's crazy. But I like it. I like the landscapes that I'm going through. It's just so different from where I live that it's a nice change.
Yes.
And because, I work in the high school, we start early. A lot of times I see like the sunrise, and it's just like, I totally embrace coming out every single day.
And then, so you were at Riverhead, but how did the opportunity come about for you to work at Greenport High School? Yeah,
so, and I think this is a common thing for most first-year teachers. I was a leave replacement at Riverhead for the first half of the school year. So from like September till, I think it was like December, January. So I was leave replacement, who I was replacing the teacher came back, but then because of the need, they did open up a position for me, but it wasn't full time. It was only like a 0.8 position. So, I was really grateful that they were able to do that for me. So I didn't have to like look elsewhere but I was still in the same location. But because they had opened that up for the second half, they didn't have that position, like a full-time position for the following year. So around like the April, May part of the school year, that's when I was like, all right, I need to see where I'm going after, because I can't wait around and like hope that they open up a position for me. Like I need to, be a little more stable and see where the other opportunities are. And then, Greenport was one of the schools that were hiring. So I was like, you know what, I might as well try and see what happens.
Yes. And then, so how has the experience been teaching out here so far?
It's been great. It's super, super different from what I experienced in my high school. So to give you an idea, like where I graduated with almost 700 kids, like in my class. And then the average class here is like 50 kids around. So that was like a shocker. I remember in my interview, I was like, so the whole district is in one building, correct? Like, I just wanted to make sure, like, is this real? That's crazy. But it's been a great experience. I think what I've gotten my experience as a teacher in Greenport, what I've gotten in the last 6 years, I would not have experienced really anywhere else. Being in a small school has so many perks. Like I've been able to coach. I am an advisor for, various clubs. Like I've been a class advisor. And I just feel like if I were at a bigger school, that probably wouldn't have presented itself until like years after being a teacher. Like that's more like veteran teachers. But it was like year one, they're like, hey, what do you want to do? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. So yeah, I've had a very positive experience being a teacher at Greenport.
And how would you describe a day in the life of an ENL teacher?
Yeah, I love this question because I feel like a lot of people don't know what an ENL teacher is or does. So to be specific, ENL stands for English as a New Language. It used to be considered ESL, but that wasn't very inclusive because a lot of our students, English isn't necessarily their second language. It could be their third, fourth, fifth. So it's now ENL, English as a New Language.
Okay.
So my day, it differs from like a content teacher because I am in different places all day long. Like I do have a classroom, I do have a home base, but because I am considered a specialty teacher, I'm hopping everywhere. So in the sense that like I have 5 classes, the next teacher also has 5 classes, that's the same, but because I'm there supporting a specific group of students, you'll find me in a lot of different content. So like, for example, this year I'm teaching, it's called co-teaching. So I'm co-teaching in a Global 2 history class. I'm also in an English 11 class. I'm in a special education class. That's what I'm doing this year. And then, but it's not limited to just those classes. Like in the past, I've been in a living environment class. I've been in earth science. I was in algebra last year. So it definitely keeps you on your feet. And I like it because I like a change of pace. I'm very embracing of change and I like to learn new things. I'm constantly looking to learn. So for me, it's like, it's the best. I think I have the best job. But in my day, I do have one period where my ENL students come to me and I am the only teacher. It's called a standalone ENL class. And that focuses more on just like English learning. So and it involves a lot of things. It can involve grammar. It can involve like social emotional things. It can involve current events. But that class is just me with my ENL students. All the other classes, it's called push-in. So I go into a class where maybe a fraction of the class is ENL students.
And then you mentioned even coaching. Is that something that you had experience with or came in later on, say, oh, I can do this as well?
Yeah, I believe I started coaching the second year I was here. I don't think I coached the first year, but I think the second year they were like, hey, did you do any sports? I'm like, well, I ran track and played soccer. They're like, how about volleyball? Like, all right, let's try it. So that's what I did. I did a few seasons in a few years of volleyball. I did JV, varsity, the junior high girls. I even did one season of basketball, but we don't talk about that. That was like a one and done. Don't ask me to do basketball again. I tried my best. But that was something I really enjoyed. I really like coaching. You just see girls in a different environment and it's just like a different relationship with the students. I also think because of my specific experience and who I am at the school, a lot of the ENL students, like I was able to be a bridge for them and them come and try new sports and new things. So that was wonderful to see too. Unfortunately, I'm not coaching anymore. I have, my son's turning 2, so I have a little one and it just gets too much. Yes. But hopefully I'll be back at it in a couple years.
And then also now with being an ENL teacher, what are some of the biggest challenges as well as rewards within the job?
So challenges, I mean, there can be so many, but some that come to mind is, learning English isn't just, it's not linear, especially when it's in the progress of the student, right? So just because you start the year off with a certain group of students who might be in the same kind of level, by like December, that could totally change. Like, some kids learn faster or are in a different pace, and, so that's a challenge because I feel like I constantly do have to change up my lessons and my content. And I say that because, it's hard for me to plan year by year with the same things. Like, I can't just assume that, what I did last year, I could just use for the next year. Like, that rarely ever works for me. I really have to see like who I have for the year. And then throughout the year, I also have to kind of reassess and see like where they're at and what they need. So that can be pretty challenging. But with experience, you kind of learn how to navigate through that and, differentiate a little bit. And so it gets easier. I feel like if I were to tell myself when I first started teaching, like I would give myself that advice and just say like, you'll get it one day, because I feel like when I first started teaching, that was super overwhelming for me. It's something I didn't expect. Like, that's not something you learn at college. Like, they don't tell you that necessarily. It's something that you just kind of go through and experience, and then you have to like figure out. But it's definitely one of the top challenges. Another challenge I feel like would probably be, and I want to say this is probably a little more specific to me, and maybe not, the umbrella of being an ENL teacher, but because I'm Spanish speaking, like I am Latina, I feel like a lot of the kids, and I am not, this is not a complaining, and this is not a complaint, but a lot of kids do come to me for a lot of things. Like I wear many hats for them. Like I can go from being their teacher to being their therapist to being their counselor to being like their friend at that moment to being like their big sister, like that could also be a little overwhelming, because I try to help them as much as I can, but sometimes that does affect me because I want to do more, but I can't, like yes. I don't want to overextend myself either, where I'm feeling burnt out because, it gets to be too much, but that can definitely be challenging. Just feeling like I'm maybe not doing enough when in reality I'm doing my best, So, I mean, there could be a million other challenges, but those are the two that really pop in my head at the moment. And then I think there was a second part of your...
And then also the rewarding aspects of the job.
I think almost in the same breath of like, I think it is really rewarding being that person for students. Like, I'm happy that they find someone that they can confide in, who happens to be me in that moment. I'm a lot of kids have they're different people, but that is a very rewarding feeling, knowing that I am helping, even though sometimes I feel like I could do more. But it is nice to know that I could be someone, to be there with whatever they need beyond the classroom. And then, I mean, just teaching in general, I think is super rewarding, because like, it's so cliche, but like the future of America is in front of you, right? Like you're helping these kids grow daily, and, on a daily basis. So I think that in itself is rewarding as a teacher, just in general.
Yes. And then also just looking at what methods or strategies have you found most effective in helping students acquire English as a language?
So, like, is this specific to an ENL teacher or
yes.
As an ENL teacher, I think there's a little bit of a misconception when people are like, oh, you're an ENL teacher, you must be bilingual, like you must know multiple languages. And that's not necessary. That's not a necessity as an ENL teacher. Like, it doesn't have to be the only strategy. And the reason I had said that in the beginning, when like my own ENL teacher, she was only English speaking, and she had such an impact that I became an ENL teacher. Like, that in itself is an example of like, you don't need to know their native language in order to help them and to help them learn. Is it a plus? Of course, it's a plus in so many ways, but it's not a necessity. But for ENL students, I think a lot of visuals is super important. And this could look like, let's say we're learning vocabulary instead of just doing like straight up cat and then like the definition of what a cat is, you could just simply put a photo and the word cat, and that will probably help them understand what a cat is, more than just like reading words, especially if they're at like the entering beginning level of English. Like visuals is super big for those who are just starting to learn English. There's a ton of resources out there, almost to the point where it's a little overwhelming with how many resources there are. But I do suggest staying a little away from translating everything. I do think there is a benefit to that, and it does depend on the student. But I think there's enough resources out there that it's not the only option. There's this one that I actually recently discovered and I really like. It's called Diffit. It's a website where you can just put in a topic and the grade. I think it's topic, grade, and class. So like let's say we're learning about World War I and Global II. I would put World War I. The class would be history or global, and then it would be like 9th or 10th grade. And then it would shoot out information, but it's differentiated. So depending on their level, the passages will vary. It's the same information, it's just catered to what you need. So there are a lot of resources that are like that. Those are the resources I try to use, just because I feel like that's not only giving the students content, but it's also helping them in their English.
And then I was curious, just in general, with your study in language, and then even the students in Greenport, but I'm just thinking, I guess, in terms of the United States, I feel like in the past we've been really not good with Americans having learned another language. When we usually go to other countries, we usually expect
I see.
them to...
So like the education system and how it uses its like languages compared to other countries.
Yeah, and then maybe was it prioritized in the past, and do you see that more students today or across the country do know more than one language, and do you see that as a priority still?
I think so. I mean, I think the overall population is changing in the sense of like ethnicity wise of just like the country. And I think that has a lot to do with prioritizing the language. I feel like, so I'm trying to think of my own experience of like when I was in high school and how my peers viewed that compared to what I see now. And I feel like the kids now are more willing to learn the language, not because it's like a fun thing to do, or it's like, oh, Spanish class, like we'll go to a field trip. Like I don't think that's really why they want to be in there. I think it's because they know that it's an asset and it'll help them in the future. I don't feel like my peers when I was in high school really viewed it that way. I think it was like, everyone's in Spanish, like all my friends are there, I'm going to take Spanish too. Like my own friends were like, you take Spanish, like you already know Spanish, it's going to be so easy. But like, that's not, I just feel like the kids have a different perspective on what it is to learn a language and how it'll help them.
And then also with your teaching here, in what ways do you work with families also to ensure students feel supported in their education? Yeah.
I mean, I'm lucky enough to know the prominent language of our ENL students. At Greenport specifically, we have, I want to say, 62% Latino Hispanic students in general. Not ENL wise, I think we're at 22, but just whole population. So lucky enough, I do know Spanish, so I can just pick up a phone and just call mom or dad or guardian and talk to them. I specifically like to do phone calls. I don't think emails are very equitable because I don't think our demographic really uses emails. So I think, that's not my first choice. My way is phone calls. And this is not just like disciplinary reasons. Like I am the teacher who calls and say, hey, your student's doing fantastic and they've really impressed me this week. Just quick, good phone call. Just wanted to let you know what they're doing over here. So I do like to do those. I think those are actually really more important than the quote unquote bad phone calls.
Yes.
So I think that's really important. I'm also the advisor for the Multicultural Club. So in that club, there is a lot of interest from the ENL students. I think for a lot of reasons. I mean, I am the ENL teacher, so like just naturally, my own students are going to think like, oh, Miss Salgado's club, let's go there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think also a lot of ENL students, unfortunately, aren't as involved as the general population. So it's their way of being involved. And we do have an annual multicultural festival. It's actually coming up. It's on April 9th. And that is like the culmination of our club and just like bringing our families together, and really just celebrating the diversity that, you know, that is found in Greenport. Because although it's 62% Latino, we see so many cultures at Greenport.
Yes.
So that's a way of kind of preserving that relationship and that involvement with the community. And then aside from that, I'm also part of this nonprofit organization. It's called Long Island Latinos Association. I'm the second vice president for it, we call it LILTA. So we're constantly trying to, you know, advocate for all students, but specifically for Latino students. And, you know, we do different things like student conferences and webinars, and we give out yearly scholarships. And so, you know, I try to get my kids involved with that too. We go to field trips to Stony Brook every year. And that conference at Stony Brook is a way of introducing them to what it is to go to college and like what would that look like, and just giving them that motivation and inspiration, you know, just being in the presence of a university and talking to different professionals. And it is a conference. We have panelists that come and volunteer their time and talk to the students, but the panelists are like all kinds of professionals. Like you'll see somebody who is a professor, a police officer, a makeup artist, you know, a fashion blogger. Like we'll have all kinds of panelists from diverse backgrounds, mostly Latinos, but from a diverse background. So I do take my students there every year.
Yeah, okay. Also, you mentioned learning Italian, but did you have a chance to experience traveling to different countries? Has that influenced your teaching approach?
Oh, absolutely. I've been lucky enough to travel to 16 countries.
Wow.
And some I've been to multiple times, Italy being one of them. Italy has a special place in my heart. I love Italy. But yeah, I definitely think that my traveling experiences has impacted how I view language. Like I love languages. Like I think if I could learn like 5 more, I would. But you know, I just being immersed in those countries, and like not only the Spanish speaking countries, but even like I've been like, for example, I've been to like Morocco. Like I didn't know the language there, but just that brings me to another level of appreciation of what how important it is, you know, to learn languages and know about other cultures and traditions. And it's just, yeah, I definitely value that a lot.
No, I think that's important and gives you kind of different perspective from just as, not saying that you can't be an ENL teacher, but it just gives you other experiences.
100%. Yeah. I think it applies to anybody. Like, I think if you are given the opportunity to go to another country and just experience a culture that's completely different from yours, I think there's really no negative to that. I think everyone should have some kind of experience of that, just as like personal growth even.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then also, do you see any changes in language education or ENL programs that excite you? And obviously one thing is a lot more technology being incorporated into learning a language now going forward. Do you feel that way? Yeah.
I think there's so many more accessible resources. So that does excite me, because I feel like it can be, I mean, not even, I feel like it's a fact. It's intimidating learning a new language, especially a language where you need to know it to be able to survive, like not survive, but like live in your community, right? Like it's not just like a fun new thing to do, but it's like, no, I need to know this language in order to be comfortable where I live. So for my students, I think it's great that they have like their cell phones. Like they could really just, if they really had the will, like they can learn English on their spare time too. And I don't think we had that in the past. It's at their fingertips. So technology wise, I mean, that in itself, I think is great. And I can only imagine how it'll keep evolving. But I mean, it does also help in the classroom to have these resources, the technology, especially. Like every student is provided with a Chromebook. So, you know, if I really wanted to, I could find different like websites and just like say, hey, go on this website. We're doing this right now. Like, and that's a beautiful thing. Like, that's crazy that we can even do that, you know, if you really think about it. Like, we have so much at our fingertips.
And do you think there should be a balance moving forward? Students could easily probably just have a conversation online or just with possibly AI in the future. Do you think there still should be some human interaction to help with learning?
100%. AI is so scary. So scary. But yeah, in my specific classroom, so the standalone classroom that I mentioned before, where I only have my ENL students, I would say like 85% of our time, I'm having them talk to each other, their pen and pencil. Like, I don't really use the computer all that much because they use it everywhere else. Like in all other classes, they are on their Chromebook, which is fine. You know, I think it's nice that they have that. Like I said, I think it's super beneficial, but I still do value the human interaction. Like look at me in the eyes when you're answering a question, like raise your hand, talk to your partner, write down the answer on paper, like practicing that, you know. So I think that's I think that's still important to hold on to.
And for students that might be struggling, what's something that you usually, what advice would you give a student that's usually struggling learning a new language?
I think just being aware of resources both in school and out of school. So I'll speak from Greenport, you know, in my experience in Greenport. Like, we not only do we have the support from like teacher to student, right? Like we have ENL teachers, we have a lot of bilingual aides, like that is a way to help students. But I feel like outside of the classroom, like students should know that the library in school and out of school, like that's another resource. Like, I just being aware that there's so much out there to help them, because I feel like a lot of students think like, okay, learning school and that's where it ends, but it's not. They can do more on their own time. And I feel like with students who are struggling, it's important to know that there are other things, right? Let me think of specific examples. So there's this organization, Carison, who offers English classes at night, like that, and they're free. So like just know that there's accessible things that they could help themselves with, I think is important to remember, because I mean, a teacher, yeah, we are there to guide you and help you as much as possible. But for a student who's struggling and is aware that they are struggling, I think they, you know, to help yourself and try to overcome and, you know, learn more, you also have to do your part too. And it doesn't have to be scary and hard. Like, just ask. Yeah. You know, like ask your teacher, hey, I want to learn more of this. Like, what do you think? Where should I? And even if your teacher doesn't know, like your counselors, they're there to help you. Your social workers, they might know, you know, things. Like, ask questions. You'll get answers.
Yes. And then we also offer classes here for adults.
Amazing.
Which has been growing, which is great too.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. But then also, just for the future of language education, is there something, if you could change one thing about language education in schools, what would it be?
I think making it almost like, I mean, a requirement is kind of like a hard word, but starting to learn languages earlier. I think that's why we find other countries know multiple languages, by the time they're young adults. But I think their education system, like, it is a requirement to start learning, in their case, English from a young age. And I'm not saying it's like, the older you are, you won't learn like that. That I'm not saying that, but I do think the earlier that that's offered, and also, like, I feel like that in alone is like sending a message to, like, for instance, if we had more bilingual classes at the elementary school, and those do exist, but I think it should be more prominent in schools in general. But I think that alone is a message, like, of how important it is. Instead of waiting until they're like in 7th or 8th, 9th grade, just starting a little earlier. If I could change it, it would be,
I think just with children and just growing up, I think people say they're just absorbing more, and more like a sponge. But I'm trying to think, when I was as a child, I think I started a little bit later, maybe 2nd grade, or where I was taking Spanish, but then tried French. But it kind of was all over the place with me trying to learn language. It was a bit of a struggle, but I think it's definitely important for the communities and the country as a whole, I think.
Yeah, just make it a little more of a priority, I guess.
Yeah. But then also for you, where do you see yourself in the future, both as an educator and in your personal journey with language and culture?
Yeah, so I didn't briefly, I mentioned it before, but I am in school right now. I'm getting my administrative certification. So by May, I'll actually be graduated. I'll have my school building and school district leader certification. So in hopefully, the near future, I'll be in that position. So I think because of my experiences as an ENL teacher and just an educator, I think I can bring a lot to the table in just being, a bilingual administrator. I coming from an ENL background, and because that's a growing population, I think that'll also be super valuable in, in the position I'll eventually hold, whether that be at a district level or at a building level. But yeah, that's kind of where my path is going. I'm not in a super rush to do it. I'm very happy in the classroom. I love my job. But that is my plan eventually.
Nice. And then also now, how long have you been working on the North Fork?
So if we include Riverhead, 7.
So 7.
7, yeah.
So just kind of with your time working out here and interacting with the community, what would you hope for the future of the North Fork and its community down the line?
I would hope that and this is I'm speaking North Fork at all. I hope we are able to keep up with the growing population, because it's needed, and it's important to have, to be inclusive of all demographics. And I mean, it just so happens that it is predominantly Hispanic Latino, especially at Greenport.
Yes.
So my hope is that we are able to just keep up with that and be able to continue giving the correct resources and guiding. And, that could look in a lot of ways. Like, we could continue staffing appropriately, of bilingual staff or just ENL staff in general. I think there's a big need for that. But just being able to meet those needs and never stop meeting those needs, because I don't think it's ever going to just stop.
Yeah.
So that would be my hope.
No, definitely. It's important for the community. And then I usually just ask at the end if there was anything else you wanted to discuss or talk about that we hadn't talked about or covered.
I don't know. I think we covered a lot. I guess one thing that I don't know if this is a question or a comment, but I what I do think is interesting is, although the North Fork is, the Hispanic population is growing, I do think it's very interesting how our neighboring districts are very different, though. Like, if you see the statistics of like the population, like comparing from like Greenport to Southold to Mattituck, and then even back to like Riverhead, I think it's very interesting to see those numbers. But I think it's also interesting to think about how we can embrace that and almost like, I don't know, somehow like work closer together. I know we do, but I think we could do better with that. I think we could do more, collaborative movement, like, with the schools.
The other school districts, whether Mattituck, Cutchogue, or Southold.
Yeah, I mean, I know, like, I know we combine some sports sometimes, and we do have events where they, intermingle, but I feel like it could be improved. I think the collaboration between all schools could be a little bit better. And I don't know how that would look like. But I do think it's, I think it's possible to do something.
Yeah, and they're very close together, I feel like. And yeah, I think that would be a important thing to, I don't know, just, it connects more of the community together instead of, because I think in the past I've talked with some people that grew up in Greenport, and obviously there can be some rivalries with the sports and stuff, but I think going back to even the 40s and 50s, I think there was I don't know if it was a stigma or something that, don't go to Greenport, or I don't know, they just there could have been some friction between the communities then, but I feel like I think we're more past that now.
Yeah, I think this is the time. I think because people are, views have changed, and just mindsets have changed. I think you're right. I think it, that the friction or whatnot of what's happened or looked like in the past, like, sure, we might still have that, but I think that's exactly what should be reconsidered. I don't know. I think the North Fork is a community in itself, like, being proud from being like from the North Fork, but that's all the schools. Like, we should embrace that and consider being more united. But again, I don't know what that would look like. But it is something that I think about, time and again.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a small enough school districts that I feel like
exactly
you can work together, where it might be harder further west with much larger student populations. So yeah, I feel like it's doable, but in terms of how it might come to fruition, but it's something to think about.
Yeah,
I think
something to think about.
No, but I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast and share your story and the wonderful work you're doing in the community. It's great.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I think this is part of the work, like I'm so honored that to be in this space and just be part of the community. And, although I'm not technically living in the community, I still do feel part of it. And just in doing things like this is important to me. So thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 112 with Nicole Salgado. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.